friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
And here we are, bringing you the world's preeminent comic book / TV movie inspired podcast.
With some killer theme music, too.
I know. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Our theme music is pretty rad, if people still use the word rad.
I do.
Yeah. Well, if I use it and you use it, then that's enough to make it matter.
Right?
We're good
that's
there.
Trending. There we go.
Hashtag rad theme music. You wish you were me. Yeah, I am. You know what? Actually, I am really proud of our intro. I think it's good.
I think that's where I knew we were on to something here when you sent me the intro music.
Definitely. So yeah, we had this really cool idea, and we had been nurturing it for a month, maybe two, and breaking it down, talking about all the different possibilities and everything, but it really didn't come together until the intro and theme music was spliced and cut and fresh and ready to go.
There's also just not enough solid punk rock left in the world. And I say that in all seriousness, not in my usual tongue-in-cheek pseudo-douchebag way. Like I legitimately love and miss punk rock.
Right now, this is serious, Jake. You're sitting next to the fire in a warm leather chair, sipping your brandy, have your pipe in hand, and you're wondering, where's the next MXPX album?
That's exactly right. Well, actually, it's on Kickstarter. I was looking at it. But the...
So you can help produce the album.
Yeah, there we go. So we just accidentally gave a plug for something we're not even getting paid to. Look at us.
Yeah. I mean, we're paying
Terrible
it forward.
At business, great at reviews.
We are paying it forward. We are what's good with humanity. This is what people need more of. You need to just say the stuff you like, whether you get paid for it or not.
Man, no joke.
So, rock on. Well, anyway, we're here. Couple of quick things. One, if this is your first episode to the Watching Comics podcast, welcome, but stop this right now and listen to a previous one because this episode is at the tail end of a little arc. Announcement number 2. If you are not a first-time listener but have been with us for a little bit but have not yet seen the end of Jessica Jones Season 2, press stop right now, watch it, and then come back. Or if you meet either of those qualifiers where you are not new and you have watched all of Jessica Jones, welcome and listen to the rest of this awesome episode.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say, it's all on the table tonight. Anything and everything can and will be spoiled.
Boom. Anything and everything can and will be spoiled. That's like the fortune cookie way of saying spoiler alert. I like that. It's a little bit it's a little bit fancier, but it's still straight. Straight to the point.
You're going to know who's in the hatch by the end of this episode.
The butler did it. Guys, we knew it all along. Yeah, so I'm excited to kind of wrap this up. So let us know what you thought of this format. Jake and I were just talking before we hit the record button that we really liked this one, selfishly, breaking it down by episode increments to be able to really talk about the marrow of everything that this season gave us. But if we're just really not self-aware and you hated it and you want something else, let us know. But I think we're probably going to stick with this format.
Yeah, this really, I thought it was fun to, first, it was kind of a callback to a simpler time. It took me 3 weeks to watch a show that the rest of the world did in 6 hours. But also at the same time, I think that, I feel good about what I'm going to say tonight feels more nuanced and more earned as a result of having slowly digested this in 3 courses.
Completely.
And, yeah, so I mean, I guess, like you said, I don't have to listen to this crap. So if if you're not liking it, do let us know. But I think this format worked. I felt good about it. But, everything's on the table right now.
I think there's 2 different schools of thought. The concept of having something that is binge-worthy speaks to the concept of the immediacy, the definite need that we feel in the moment of wanting to really enjoy and make a moment last as long as possible. I get that, and it's really rewarding. And sometimes you just want to buckle down and spend the bulk of a weekend or the bulk of a night and watching something in a single flare in a very unhealthy way that we're not typically designed to do, but then you just kind of love it, right? It's just kind of great. And we all have shows that we've done that with. But there's something to be said about taking in art that you know is meaningful to you, or art that has the potential to say something, or even just art that has a complex story, whether it's good or not, and allowing it to marinate that permits you to piece things together in a fashion that I think is more natural, but also allows you to draw more conclusions that you wouldn't have necessarily drawn in the moment if you would have binged and then immediately had a conversation right after. Like, I don't know if we pick apart subplot as much as we do. I don't know if we pick apart tone as much as we do, or maybe they sound completely differently because we're coming at them from a lens of, we just ran this marathon without stopping, rather than saying we went on a road trip and took off a couple of different times to park and eat some really good food in between.
It's a solid analogy.
Yeah, so I thought it was solid, so I thought I would introduce it here into the arena. But anyway, I just say that to say that, like, it was a good exercise about remembering that my brain can process some things differently in a good way if I allow myself to slow down. Now, I still think I would have loved Jessica Jones Season 2 if I would have watched everything in a single weekend, but I probably would have gone back to it 3 or 4 months from now and watched it a second time and picked up a few things that I probably pieced together in our previous episodes that we were able to do because we spaced it out over the course of 3 weeks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. And it brings to mind for me, this is something that I've been pondering actually the last 3 weeks. And it's not exactly on topic, but it's adjacent, is like,
we're going deep, y'all.
Yeah, but like as a creator, excuse me, if I were going to make a show right now, I'm curious to know if writers, when they're putting television shows together here in this golden age of television we're in, how much thought goes into whether this show should be consumed in a binge or if it needs to be slowly digested weekly. Because I think that there's certain shows that better support that binge format, and there's others that maybe they don't work as well unless you take the time to think them over and and there's some shows that I think maybe are not getting formatted correctly. You know, I mean, to stick with our comic book theme, I think that I'll say that, like, The Flash is a show that I really enjoyed when I watched it in a binge the first season, and obviously we can spend all day breaking down what didn't work about future seasons of The Flash after the first one. But I think that trying to do it week by week the second season got a little more tedious for me and made that harder. And so I don't know. I just think about, like, when creators are thinking what to do, does format come into that? You know, are you saying to yourself, this has to go on a streaming service because that's the way it's meant to be consumed? Or is it flexible? I don't know. So it's just something that I've kind of been reflecting on.
Yeah, and I definitely think what makes that fascinating is it's definitely a subjective topic. It definitely comes back to, like, what medium is this going to be mainly consumed through, what audience is our demographic, who is the showrunner, you know, how many episodes do we need to fill, what's the time limit of each episode, who are the characters, what are the arcs we need to establish, all of that affect it. But it is a fascinating conversation. I do think, I would dare say that Jessica Jones is a show that is best, at least, yeah, Jessica Jones is a show that is best watched incrementally. And I think that because the prime example I keep thinking of as we've been talking these last few minutes, Jake, is just the concept of Jeri and her character and our growing distaste for whatever the heck it is the writers are doing with her. I think it is more glaring to me over the course of these 3 weeks that she just didn't belong in the greater scheme as much as they forced her down our throats in this season. I think it was more glaring to me that she didn't belong here because of the time that I had spaced out watching it, because I would find myself reflecting on so many different things, and anytime I would come to her, it would be one of those moments where I had to force myself to consider her. It wasn't organic because it didn't really belong to any of the key subplots I wanted to unpack. And it certainly didn't belong in the greater conversation of family relations or relationship alienation or mental health, which were the three biggest proponents of the season, I think. And she just kept sticking out like a sore thumb. And clearly that's because they're building her up to do something larger in season 3. I think season 2 may have had a general arc that they were saying with the overall season, but if there was anything that was set up for something later, it was Jeri's character, which I get. But if we're looking at just season 2 as an entity in and of itself, like it was glaring that she didn't belong because she wasn't piecing together in anything that I wanted to stew on in between these weeks of watching.
So this is what I've kind of been looking forward to getting to, because I'm going to admit that I actually this week am going to pull a 180 on Jeri.
Don't do it, Jake, don't do it.
Well, okay, so I still don't know exactly where she fits in everything. Like, thematically, I'm still with you. That thematically, I'm not certain that her ALS storyline fit. But I said last week that the only ending that, well, I said it in text and to you and Jared Wiley, and then we talked about it last week, that the only ending that really makes sense to me, that fits for me with her, is tragedy. And that moment, and so I said that having, like, I think the last thing I had watched before we recorded then was her supposedly being healed. And then that moment when she walks back into her apartment and everything is missing and she just falls to the ground and starts sobbing, that was the tragedy moment I think I needed. And then that moment where she goes out and gets the gun and goes Tony Soprano cold-blooded on those two people and tricks them into killing each. Holy crap. I mean, Jeri Hogarth really wanted to remind us that in a universe that includes zombie ninjas, she's still the scariest thing around. And I really felt like, as much, so I don't know that the plot with her, the subplot, always worked this season. I think it meandered a bit, and I don't know that it fit thematically, but when push comes to shove, it wrapped up so nicely for me in so many ways that I think it redeemed itself. And it's not Jeri that I think was the worst subplot of the season anymore. I'm actually going to push that on Trish now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh man, Jake, you have wow. Okay. So
I was supposed to redeem the Force, not leave it in shambles. I know.
You were the chosen one. Okay. Yeah, so the fault line has shifted here. Okay, so I will meet you halfway on the Jeri thing, and I will say the Tony Soprano moment is a perfect way to capture that. Wonderful, well done. As the token Sopranos expert, well done. That singular moment of how she got retribution and how she got those two con artists to kill themselves, like that moment itself was great. I was cheering for it. It was the sadistic anti-hero moment that I wanted all season for her. It was amazing. I don't think the emotional moment before it was earned. I even tweeted about this, feeling like I still didn't feel what I needed to feel there. And obviously, as much as I loved that Tony Soprano moment for her, I'm still left with this gaping hole that clearly says we are leading up to a season 3 moment for Jeri. And I guess it was really difficult for me to come to terms with how disjointed that felt within the middle of a season that had everything else feel so complete. You know what I mean? Like, I realize that there's still some open end. Obviously, the Jessica and Trish relationship is fractured, that sort of thing. But really, the big things that Jessica Jones season 2 set out to say, they pretty much tied up in a knot. Like, it was basically a nuclear season. It was a Dexter season. It was, this is what we're doing with who we're doing it with. Here's the new main character, and then this is what's going to happen to her. You're never going to see her again. Like, that's what we got, except for the Jeri piece, which I get. You've got to have something like that to lead into, but at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I'll be sitting here in the middle of season 3 thinking like, Mitch, you should have just shut up and just been patient. But I'm not emotionally invested. And if the Tony Soprano moment is going to turn her sinister and turn her into more of a foe to Jessica than as a friend, I'm all here for it. I think that's a great path to take, and maybe I just needed to be patient like we needed to be with Breaking Bad, and we didn't get a payoff until season 3. I get it. That's cool. But in the moment right now, I still feel unsatisfied.
Well, and also with Jeri, I get the feeling that maybe this is pure speculation on my part. I've never read anything or heard anything to suggest that I'm right here, but I get the feeling sometimes that there's a little bit of disconnect at the studio about what that character is. Listeners that are interested, in the comics, Jeri Hogarth is actually a male character who is Iron Fist's attorney and kind of his, for lack of a better term, he's his Alfred to his Batman sometimes. And so, I get the feeling that the Iron Fist show is trying to drive the character of Jeri Hogarth towards that eventually, and that Jessica Jones is trying to say, no, we really need our black hat. And I feel like maybe what's going on here with Jeri this season, you're saying setting up season 3. I'm not so sure that it isn't just setting up like the next season of Iron Fist or something because of the interconnected nature of these things.
That could be, and I honestly didn't think about that, which just proves once again that you're more brilliant than I am. So that might be that might be the connection. And I think either way, it will probably end up making sense. But this does allude to something that we were texting about last night, which I think is a good segue for us to bring into like. I don't think it was a deal breaker with the season. I did find it very, I don't know, maybe fascinating or very fishy that the Defenders was never once mentioned in this season, because this is the first installment of a season of a Marvel TV show that we have, of a Marvel Netflix show that we have since the Defenders, because Daredevil's first 2 seasons came before Defenders. So this is it. This is the first time Marvel has given us episodes into worlds that we have lived in before, but post the team up edition, and there was no mention of it. Nothing. Luke wasn't anywhere to be found, and there was no mention of a previous incident or the team up gang or anything like that, which I just found very fascinating. What do you make of that?
I think I got 2 theories here, and one of them I mentioned to you. The easiest one, I think, is that the Defenders, like, it's not a bad show, but it's not what I think we all hoped it would be. And there's talk that maybe Marvel is not interested, Marvel or Netflix, whoever is not real interested in a second season of the Defenders, and that they'd rather just keep these characters. Maybe they cross over into one another's shows from time to time.
Do a classic Shonda crossover.
Right. and so I think that the easiest answer is to just say, the Defenders was supposed to be Netflix's Avengers, and it ended up being something less than that. It just wasn't really the amazing finale on this story. And then, I mean, I could go all day about the reasons why I think that is. But I think the other possibility, Jessica Jones seems like more removed from the connected universe than the rest of the other 3 shows. I mean, you've definitely got Daredevil and Iron Fist are definitely right in there with all their stuff about the hand and all their stuff trying to set that up and expand that mythology. Luke Cage is a little more removed. But I feel like Jessica is like a totally different, like you really could do Jessica Jones outside of the Marvel universe and it wouldn't affect it in any way, shape, or form, I don't think.
Completely. And I think that may be a contributing factor to why I love the show so much. But I think I'm good with going on the record as saying that I would be 100% in favor of them just not even worrying about Defender Season 2 and carrying on as they did with Jessica. Like, Daredevil Season 3 doesn't need to mention Defenders. Luke Cage Season 2 doesn't need to mess with that. As we've already discussed, Iron Fist can just be thrown in the trash because what they're doing cinematically with that is just awful. So I think that's probably the better choice, because I'm going to go ahead and say that I thought Jessica Jones season 2 was not only worthwhile, but it lived up to the hype. Over the course, I just want to assume that the show is going to be on for 5 or more seasons, because all the good shows are, and I would classify this as a good show. And if you've got 5 or more seasons of a show, you've got a large dossier to choose from. And that means there are going to be some seasons that are stronger than others, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the other seasons are weak. It just means some are more robust. Obviously season 1 is damn near perfect television, especially comic book related television. But season 2, I think I can still give it a high grade. Like, it did not let me down. Even with the slow start in the first couple episodes, it was gripping. I was invested. There was enough complexity and nuance for me to feel like it was high level, but there was still enough entertainment and noir factor to make me feel like I was watching something, energetic and innovative at the same time. I think Jessica Jones season 2 holds up. And so I say that to say that I'm not sitting here feeling like I need more Defenders World. And if you were to tell me going into Jessica Jones season 2, before I watched an episode, that they weren't going to allude to it at all, but that there was still going to be this great unknown about how Defenders would go on moving forward, I would go in a little apprehensive. But I'm here on the other side to say, you know what? This was the right decision. Keep going.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I had really high hopes for Defenders. I had really high, because the thing is, like, these 4 characters, like, that they used for it was pretty perfect in theory. And I think it's about halfway through. Well, it's, if you want to break down what we'll call, for lack of a better term, phase 1 of the Netflix universe here, really where I think the thing started to go off the rails was, like we talked about last week, it was Mahershala Ali's death. Mm-hmm. And it's when you take out Cottonmouth, suddenly Luke Cage gets weird. And then after that,
it doesn't make any sense to me to why you would have arguably the most noteworthy and talented actor out of your entire universe of television shows and kill him off that early or that abruptly in the middle of the season. Like, it just makes no sense to me. It's like, he's got the chops to carry a whole friggin' show. Why'd you kill him off in 5 episodes?
Well, and it's, I read some interviews where, in response to the backlash to killing that character off, the showrunner was talking about, I get why people don't like it. And he said the idea was we needed to find a way to be different and do something unexpected. And at this point, how can you be unexpected and surprising anymore? They said all we could come up with was this. I get where they're coming from with that.
It's a cop-out, man. They're trying to define things by formula. That's what that is. That's what happens when you're trying to produce something based off of a formulaic approach, instead of just saying, like, you know what, let's write a good narrative and the twists and turns will take care of themselves if we've written something high quality, rather than saying, you know what, we finished these 12 episodes, they're really good, but we feel like in order to be headline grabbing and to trend on Twitter, we really need to just F with somebody's mind in episode 6. So what could we do to just really throw a kink in things to say that we threw a kink in things?
No, I think you're right. I think it, to tie it into the sports world, I think it's like when people want to fire a coach just to get change. And the question is always like, yeah, good. I'll say we live in Nebraska, and so I'm a Husker fan, and it's like, for years, every couple of years, everybody's like, well, let's fire the coach. And so I don't always think that's a terrible idea, but then my follow-up question is, well, who are you going to get?
Yeah, and I think who's better than what we've got?
And that's it. And I think in this situation with Luke Cage, it's like, you say to yourself, well, we want to do something to change things up, and that's awesome, but what are you changing to? Because change for change's sake is an empty thing. And I think that's what we saw in the second half of Luke Cage. Is it's just kind of soulless, as opposed to the incredible driven performance in the first half of the season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So it's time to lay the chips on the table.
Yeah.
How did you feel about the last few episodes and how it ended?
Can I start by saying I watched all these with my wife. We do a lot of things together.
Aw.
And I know, right?
Totes,
Yeah.
totes adorbs. Hashtag relationship goals.
We've come so far from college when she would trick me into watching Real Housewives with her.
I can tell you that my wife watched absolutely 0 full episodes of this with me because she's not one bit interested in comic book lore. And the few times she would walk by and see a part of an episode, or she was kind of in the room doing something else while I was finishing up an episode or something, and she would look up at the TV like maybe 4 different times throughout the whole season. 4 different times. Almost every single time there were people having sex or about to have sex. And so at one point she finally just looked at me and she goes, "So I don't know anything about this comic book thing that you're watching, but is it like supposed to be an erotic one? Because all everyone does is have sex."
To which you say, you should read The Incredible Hulk.
All right. Get you some She-Hulk going.
You know, Elise, my wife, is really good about, like, she's good at saying, I like this, I don't like this, you know, and she'll just bow out if something isn't interesting to her, and if it is, she'll stick around. So she watched none of the Defenders with me, but she watched Jessica Jones with me, and she kind of lost track of where we were in things. And so Jessica Jones season 2 is 13 episodes, and after episode 12, which ends with Jessica's mom has abducted her, has her in the van and or the RV, and is driving away with her.
Yeah, knocked her out.
Yeah, so the episode ends and my wife goes, "Wow, that was a really dark ending." And I was like, "Well, yeah, so let's see what happens next." But it got me thinking. I don't say that to tease, but to say, I really got to thinking about, what if they had ended it there? Like,
okay. So I'm glad you brought this up because I have another "what if they ended it there" moment too, but it's not the same as yours. So keep going.
Well, yeah, and I was just going to say, like, I think the ending we got was great. I'm not knocking that ending or saying this would have been better, but it was just a fun game of what if, where I said, I think we thought Trish was dying. Jeri had just, like, gone, you know, take the cannoli, leave the gun on some people.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of sitting here like, good Lord, this is dark. And I thought, if that had been the way it ended, well, for starters, it's kind of a cliffhanger, which is not always fun. But at the same time, though, it's like, man, what if they had the guts to let that be the ending? Like, this is it. She's been abducted. Now we're going to have to come back next year and see how they get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That would have been really, really good. I'm right there with you. It would have been trippy. It also would have committed Mom to being in the next season for probably more than a single episode at that point too, which obviously the writers weren't prepared to do. But man, it would have been great. Here's my idea for where it should have ended. I guess basically what we could have done was we could have just made episode 12 like a half hour longer and made it an hour 20 instead of 55 minutes. And we end the whole thing with spoilers, with Mom getting shot in the Ferris wheel, Jessica sitting with her in that rickety car with the Ferris wheel stopped, with that great camera shot that we got with her, just where you could barely see over the edge of her bloody face carrying or holding her mother in there. That was such a powerful moment. But what if the closing shot of the season is that shot, but Jessica doesn't see Trish shooting her yet? Only the audience knows that Trish was the one that shot her.
Can I take that and run with it and say, I love the idea of extending episode 12 and not doing episode 13, because I have a pet peeve with when half of a season finale, the second half of it is just a prologue for the next season. And
that's all it was. I felt the whole last 15 minutes of episode 13 was just, I can't believe I'm going to say this about the show, but it's the only moment I've felt like where they had lazy writing.
Yeah.
It was
well, because like, what do I care about Jeri selecting furniture for her new office? Like, what? So much of that could have been done in a much more efficient, tidy way. But this is Mitch, my big. I have only, when you break it all down, I think I only truly have one real complaint about season 2. One true criticism, and that is that I don't think it needed to be as long as it was, because if they shortened it, what if Jeri's story wasn't, for you who found Jeri to be the most grating thing all through, not just the first 2 portions, like what if Jeri was not getting as much screen time and we were just getting the occasional drop in on her situation? And what if Trish wasn't spending entire 3 and 4 episodes at a time hitting the inhaler and trying to hide it, and instead we were just progressing through her descent into addiction and how it affected her relationship? And if things sped up on those subplots a little bit and they were forced more to revolve around the main plot of Jessica and her mom, I think it fixes the only problems you can find in this season.
I completely agree. I think this could have been done in 11 episodes. Maybe 10, with the 10th one being like movie length.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, and this again comes back to wanting to be in the room to ask some questions. And I don't even know that they'd be critical questions, because maybe there's something to making these shows that I don't understand. But I do want to be there to ask, why did we think we needed 13 episodes? Because how often, like, it's Netflix. You don't have to do 13 episodes. You didn't get an order for 26 weeks. And you got to have a special to show at halftime on the Super Bowl. Like, you've got complete creative freedom, I mean, I think Stranger Things was like 3 episodes this season, and why does it have to be 13? Why did we arrive at that number? And this is what I'm forced to come back to. I really think that after what's worked so well with The Punisher in season 2 of Daredevil, I think somebody said, maybe we see if people want to do a Hellcat show. And I really think we got so much time establishing the rest of this universe. And I'm not saying Jeri would be like a major character in Hellcat, the show, that may never happen, because I don't think it got the response they wanted to do the show. But I think, look at how much time was dedicated to trying to give Trish her own separate pull away from Jessica, where she's got her own things going and her own problems, and how much time was spent trying to establish these characters away from Jessica, who should be the sun that their planets revolve around. And I think that's the only real weakness with the show. And I think it's the weakness with this format that we see today, that much as I love the Marvel films, as psyched as I am to go see Infinity War, I think the weakness of these shows and these movies and this whole style, this format, is that you get so caught up in building your world that you forget to tell a story sometimes.
I'm right there with you. I was really, the last few episodes, I started to find myself hot and cold with Trish a little bit. Leading up to it, I was mostly fine, because I kind of knew where the direction was going. But then I think back on it and I'm like, some of it was needless and some of it was a touch heavy-handed. And the only thing that makes sense is trying to establish the possibility of maybe setting up something else for her. As in a different
that scene
show.
when she catches her cell phone at the very end, like, it was as bad as the rest of this show was good.
It was. I completely agree. That the whole last 15, 20 minutes of that episode was just poor, and it's tough to have that be your last taste in the mouth. But I thought there was an awful lot of humanizing and understandable exploration with Trish in this season that I don't want to negate, but also at the same time, there was some of it that was just a little juvenile. And so it'll just be really interesting to see where they go with that. But yeah, I think 10 to 11 episodes would have been the sweet spot for a season that was really, really good and still had a little room for improvement.
Well, I don't want to dog on Trish all night here, but I also think, like, did the sibling rivalry angle feel really forced to you?
Oh yeah, totally.
Like, it
Completely.
makes sense intellectually. Oh, yeah, probably sucks to have a superhero for a sister.
I mean,
But
it makes sense if you're establishing that maybe earlier on, maybe a little bit in season
yes.
one. I think part of the problem is sibling rivalry is a lot more gratifying of a story if it is experienced on both sides. Jessica never once has ever had a moment at least that we have seen so far in these 2 seasons. She's never had a moment where we were led to believe that she was jealous of Trish. Now, she may not want her powers and she may want a little more normal life from time to time, but we've never really been given a moment where it was clearly Jessica is green with envy of something directly related to or because of Trish. Whereas Trish this entire season was just FOMO to the max. And I just don't know. I feel like that needs to be balanced a little bit more instead of completely one-sided. And I think the rift was supposed to be Jessica found her real family, but because the Jessica dichotomy of I don't know if this real family counts or not, and I don't know if I should keep this real family because my mother is so dangerous, that was played so well that I don't think the rift of I've chosen my mother, I'm forgetting you, Trish, was ever really earned or believable or established.
Yeah, I'd agree with that because, I mean, and I think it was a bit confusing to me how when Jessica started to get on board with the idea of running off with her mom, it was confusing to me because this is just minutes after we saw her ready to fight her mom to protect Trish and call her sister. And it felt unearned is a good word for it. You know, like you said, I just think that, well, and Trish came off as so petty at those last few episodes, like yelling at Jessica for saving her life and for stopping her from getting superpowers. It
maybe
felt
that was
so
maybe that
petty.
was part of it is like the concept of like the last 2 episodes was where Trish officially launched into I'm the victim mode, and I don't think it was believable for me to emotionally identify with her as the victim. It was more of at least the dialogue she was spouting was I'm the victim, but the only feeling I kept getting throughout those last 2 episodes with Trish was just no, you're just selfish and unsatisfied. And maybe that's the way I'm supposed to feel, but at least dialogue wise, Trish's character was like, no, woe is me. And I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. It just came so out of left field, and it's so different than the character that we came to know in season 1. And it's such a different, like, it's not that, you know, relationships should change and evolve. And I think a better look at, you know, a relationship that didn't go well for Jessica this season is Malcolm, who we've talked about before. That one I felt was earned, the way she pushed him away. And it fit with the development of the characters. But Trish, it's like for the first few episodes, she's the same Trish she always was. She's got her sister's back. They're working together to solve this mystery. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just total 180, Trish is like, by the way, I'm a drug addict again. I hate you. I want superpowers too.
Yep. Yeah, that it wasn't earned whatsoever. Whereas I couldn't agree with you more that the Malcolm narrative was tragic and wonderfully done.
Yeah,
and I was completely locked in for that entire journey for him. It was, and I felt what I needed to feel at the right moments because it was earned. It was there. I thought Malcolm was low key the best. Yeah, the best subplot of the season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that because, like, at the end there, when he walks in with Price, you know,
that was chilling.
Oh my gosh!
He walks in with his swagger, and you can tell by the look on his face that Malcolm has when he walks into Jeri's office with the look on his face, knowing that he's got the right gig now. Like it told me in a moment where no dialogue was needed that Malcolm has leveled up, and we traveled with him to get to that level in a very believable way.
Yeah, and it's like I legitimately, as much of a scumbag as Price is, And I think I said in our first episode about this show that I was never going to be able to like Jessica again if Malcolm ended up joining Price. And that's not how it ended up playing out. But I was like, when I should have been really disappointed that he joined Price and felt like this was someone going to the dark side. Instead, I was just like, you know what? Malcolm's earned a real job. You know, he deserves to be pulling in a check. This is good for Malcolm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I said this in each of the last 2 episodes. I'm just going to say it one more time. Kristen Ritter.
Oh, so good.
She's a phenomenal actress. And I thought she was wonderful with Janet McTeer playing her mom, Melissa. I thought Janet really turned it on, especially in the last 4 episodes, and was truly conflicted. And I believed it. In a world that was fantastical and not one bit realistic, I believed Alyssa's journey. And I believed Jessica's struggle to piece everything together. And I just want to... The beginning of episode 11 with that phone call when the guard doesn't show up to Alyssa's cell and she knows something has happened, and Alyssa convinces her way to getting a phone call and calls Jessica, and Jessica is sitting there at the murder scene and falling apart, and they have that cryptic conversation. That was, I mean, we're only 4 months deep into the year, but that may be tough to beat for my top moment of television for the year. That was a single perfect scene, and that was a wonderful way to showcase both of their acting chops and the character confliction and the symbolic barrier that is between them with the telephone line. But just so much was done in a short moment that was masterful writing and masterful acting and masterful filmmaking. And I just thought that if I could take like just a couple of moments out of the season and sum it up in a nutshell for both why was it put together conceptually brilliantly, but also why was it entertaining to watch and why is it engaging as a show, that moment sets at the top for me.
And I think that it is a testament to how good this show really is, to how well performed it is, that we have been talking for so long tonight and we haven't even begun to discuss David Tennant's guest appearance, which was phenomenal. And like, so I'm not knocking that because I have before
not ready for that either.
Well, and I've talked about my Tennant love, but the reality is that like, it's as good as it is, it's not the best part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But man, that was a stroke of genius. And they didn't overdo it just when it was about to get to the point of being kitschy. They cut it, and that was
if
perfect.
He had been there all season talking to her in her mind, It would have been awful. But because it's one episode, also, you know, for you, it's the moment of Jessica on the phone with her mom, and that's going to be a runner-up for me. My favorite moment of the show is Kilgrave singing "I Want Your Cray Cray" as Jessica leaves.
Oh my god. Gosh, he was just so beautifully infused. And so that's one thing that I really appreciate about the writing and the showrunners of Jessica Jones is it's already a really good show. And we know that the journey of the whole arc is going to be worthwhile, and we're going to say this was really, really good. But then they also give us it reminds me an awful lot of Mad Men, where I'm watching Mad Men and I know that I'm gripped by the story. I'm connected to these characters, and I know over the course of the season I'm going to go through an awful lot, but when I get to the end of it, I'm going to be really, really glad I made this journey. But then along that journey, there's going to be 2 or 3 moments or single episodes that come in and just completely rock my world with unexpected brilliance. And Jessica's got those components, where we talked about it with episode 7 of this season and much of episode 11. It's just they know how to deliver a consistent, high-quality show while also knowing when and how to hit a home run at the right times.
I've kind of been sitting on this, but I'm gonna go ahead and make my crazy bold statement here.
Do it.
I think that let me give all the context here. Let me just make the whole statement is that I think that this season fails more often than the first season, but I think that that is a result of taking more chances and gambling more. I think it succeeds so much more often than it fails. And I am ready to go ahead and say I actually think I liked season 2 more than season 1. When all is said and done, I think that this season felt, I didn't feel, and I mean this in a good way, and this is going to sound weird on a comic book, TV, movie podcast, but I mean in a good way that I didn't feel like I was watching a Marvel property. And season 1, I mostly didn't, but I still did sometimes. This felt like a show that could be on, it didn't feel Marvel-y. It felt like it could be on AMC. It felt like it could be on HBO, Showtime, something like that. It felt like a serious, just, we're going to make the best show that we can. They rolled the dice, and a few times it didn't work. We've talked about the length of things. I think they took too long getting where they were going with Jeri. I don't want to see a Hellcat show, but I think that the drama of Jessica and her mom, I think that the very human nature of it, the refusal to pull punches, I think this show is on the level of something like Breaking Bad, Mad Men. I think this season propelled it there, and I don't think it gets enough credit, and I don't understand why when we talk about the best TV shows during this age of television, we aren't right there with Jessica Jones as among the top 5.
Okay, so would you say that maybe a big contributing factor for season 2 vaulting over season 1 for you, with that kind of lack of comic booky feel and just the concept of the universe that it's living in, like you mentioned, would you say the lack of traditional black hat villain was a common ingredient for you making that decision? Because we talked an awful lot in the first episode of this when we were talking about the first 3 episodes, and we're like, we still don't have a villain. Is that a problem, or is it going to be more like a Dexter and it won't be an issue? Well, here we are, and we have our answer. And it was the same answer we had initially predicted in the first episode, which was that if we really needed to label something a villain, it was a system. It wasn't really a person.
That's so good, because you have in Jessica's mom, you have this look at, man, that's such an insightful thing. Like, you just put into words what I've been trying to figure out to say. Like, no, it's so perfect, because the doctor, oh gosh, I've totally Carl abuses the mom, and so the mom abuses Jessica, who has went out and been abused by Kilgrave, and Trish is abused by her mom, and it's this look at the system of abuse and the cycles of it, that Jess's mom is simultaneously victim and villain, and they do that so beautifully there, where this is you nailed it, and I hope they take that theme into season 3. And I hope now they try to give us something where they look at, it's on Jessica now to break the cycle. And it's on her to say, she's not going to go make more victims. She's going to break the cycle. But all that aside, no, you nailed it, man. That's exactly right. But I think you're right. I think it's the lack of a villain.
It is. And if anything in this season, the big revelation for Jessica, at least subtextually, the big revelation for Jessica is that everything that happened in season 1 is not what made her messed up. It was a side effect of what had made her messed up, which is the cycle of abuse and the self-destruction. And so, I think they played it beautifully in season 2, but it's only going to have so much runway. And so eventually she's got to come to that crossroads of like, okay, now I recognize it's this cycle. It is this system, this regurgitating thing that happens. And now I need to come to a point where I break that. And I think she discovered that in season 2, where it's like, it wasn't just Kilgrave. That's not just the reason I was messed up. He was a part of a bigger thing. And so, that if that is your thing, then definitely season 2 is the jam. And I thought that they did it beautifully. I'm not sure just from the sake of a television standpoint, I'm ready to make season 2 is better than season 1. But I mean, we're splitting hairs here. I would give season 1 an A plus and season 2 an A. So it's not like anybody's going home in the back of the bus with a dunce cap on. You know what I mean? So I just, the show definitely belongs in the conversation with some of the best, as you have said, in this era of prestige TV. It's got to be on there, and they're doing it because it is a show that is taking risks, but it's also telling things from a point of view that is sobering and real, but also under-acknowledged and underappreciated in a lot of ways. This is a female showrunner taking a female character that is drastically flawed and getting female directors to direct the entire thing and basically saying, we are going to tell a story of imperfect humans even when they're super and larger than life. And we're going to give it to you in a way that is unflinching, that is unapologetic, but that is also deeply emotional and easy for us to get emotionally invested in. And all of that sounds awfully pie in the sky, but here we are 3 years later with 26 episodes of really good, high-quality accomplishment in that light.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you nailed it with also, I think we knew coming in that it was going to take one of the most epic meltdowns in the history of entertainment for this to not be about splitting hairs to determine which season we liked more. Man, it would have had to been some kind of huge disaster. So I think you're spot on with that. I guess for me, the question is, where do you think it goes from here?
Yeah. So I find myself arriving at two schools of thought. One is, if we're going the traditional villain route, clearly there's room on the runway for Jeri to become more sinister, and obviously they're setting up a draw the line in the sand moment between her and Jessica, whether it's a subplot one or a main seasonal arc, one is coming. So that's an obvious choice. Or the other choice is to pull out another villain and just make it another nuclear season, another Dexter-like season, whether it's a villain of systemic proportions or a actual traditional Black Hat villain like a Kilgrave ilk. Those seem to be the two options ahead of them. Excuse me. I almost would. I don't know. I'm just so torn on the Jeri thing. I know more is coming and I need to be more patient, but at the same time, I'm kind of tired of being patient with her and would just like for them to decide.
Yeah, I think I don't know like what I don't want to see Jessica get to the point where she's like throwing on tights and trying to join the Avengers. Again, back to the comics, the end of her story, not that anything ever truly ends in comic books, but the end of her story is she actually ends up settling down with Luke Cage and starting a family.
See, I was gonna ask that question. Do you think they're gonna bring that back at any point in time? Is like, are they gonna that seems to be like a natural ender for the whole series? But if they are gonna do that at some point, they have to reintroduce Luke too, right?
Yeah, it's tough for me because up to a certain point, I have hated every single possible love interest for Jessica or Luke that's not Jessica or Luke. Oscar was a pretty good dude that was hard to root against. And I really got to like him. That's right. The super is Oscar.
Yeah.
But I think that what I'd like to see her do, where I'd like to see the character growth happen, I don't even necessarily need, and I know they'll go this route because that's how things work. I don't even necessarily need them to mend fences with Trish. I don't need her to bring Malcolm back into the fold. I think that it's okay for her to be able to look back and say, I was toxic and I pushed people away. What I'd like to see is where the stories of Jessica Jones really take off for me is when she starts becoming this PI that tries to work for people who have been mistreated. She gets away from the sleazy end of PI work and she starts trying to do a little bit more like, there's this really great story in the comics where, and obviously they couldn't do it until recently with the mutant angle, but there's this girl that goes missing in a small town, and Jessica comes to figure out where she is, and it ends up being that this girl is a mutant like an X-Men, and there's all this bigotry involved in her disappearance and stuff, and I think that I would like to see her get to that route where I don't want Jessica to be this fully healed, for lack of I think it'd be disingenuous for her to be like suddenly some cookie cutter superhero. I want to see her heal in a realistic way, which is you still got your scars and you're not completely someone else's definition of healthy, but you're your own definition of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and she can still champion the underdog and still be wildly imperfect.
And I think that's kind of I think that they went that route. It would be true to the spirit of the source material, but there's so many different ways they could take it. I don't think I necessarily want to see, to answer your question, another big black hat villain, because who's going to equal David Tennant as Kilgrave? You're just not going to do it. I mean, we struck gold 3 times with this Netflix universe with Kingpin and then Kilgrave and then Cottonmouth. And then obviously you can see we clearly ran out of ideas because we got to watch the Hand run around resurrecting everyone who's ever had 30 minutes on screen.
Pretty much. I'll be interested to see how they kick off the next season with the Trish debacle, because I guess I kept wanting them to end it differently because it seemed like such good real estate for exposition at the beginning of a season that they just completely surrendered with the campy ending. Like, if they would have ended the season with us knowing Trish pulled the trigger, but Jessica not yet knowing she pulled the trigger, then that, to me, brings higher stakes to the beginning of season 3 than with Jessica already knowing, and then them having that really cliche conversation of, "You're not my family anymore." I'm like, man, that could have been a really cool, like, episode 3 moment, or episode 2 moment. But anyway, small potatoes. It'll be interesting to see what they choose to kick it off with. But I think I want them to stick with the serialized route, which is every season, even though there's larger arcs that carry on through each season, they're basically standalones. Doing the Dexter approach for the first 6 seasons, at least, of Dexter. I think I want them to keep with that because they're doing it really, really well. It still feels comic booky in that sense, but realistic at the same time. And I'm so deeply invested into the way that they craft things, as well as the character of Jessica herself, that I almost feel like I would be alienated if they didn't keep up with that approach in season 3. But at the same time, if they do something completely different and it's still brilliant, I may not care.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think that with the serialized approach that you're mentioning, I think you could be true to that noir private eye shtick that we both have enjoyed so much, where, for lack of a better explanation, the structure could be that each season is a different case. Mm-hmm. And obviously both seasons we've got so far have grown beyond that. But if each season begins with, here's this case, first season it's the girl that gets in the elevator with her parents, second season it's the whizzer. If there's some sort of like weird comic booky lead in that then we get into this really deep exploration of these really damaged but lovable but good characters, I think that I just don't know how you can do better television than that.
Couldn't agree more. Give me a good deep character study and unfold things that are earned, but it still make me feel like I'm smart enough to figure it out. So just basically do it like Breaking Bad and we're good. Yeah. That's what I want. So awesome. Jessica Jones, season 2, solid stuff. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. We appreciate it. So next week we're going to be coming back at you, but obviously we will not be talking about Jessica Jones. So get excited for a topic changer. It's going to be good. Don't know what it's going to be yet, but we know it's going to be good because we know us. That's how we do it.
That's true. And the nice thing is that in a couple weeks, we've basically got our schedule laid out for us. Thanks, Marvel and Russo brothers.
Yeah, that's right. We love what you're doing. Keep making our lives easier. Thank you. Check us out at watchingcomics.com. Be sure to send us an email or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram if you have any feedback or episode ideas, or just want to send us some fan mail, because we like that too. But anyway, check us out and rate and review, please, because it's the nice thing to do, the neighborly thing to do. Mr. Rogers would want you to do that.
Yeah, I read recently that when you search for things online, certain algorithms only kick in to bring up results if they're getting enough rate and reviews. So
True story.
if you want a few other people to listen to this thing, rate and review it. Give us more help on the algorithms.
Rock on. We will be coming back at you next week, folks.
All right. Have a great week.